Most people think silence is just silence, but let me tell you, it's never just silence. When someone pulls away when they go into no contact, avoidants don't just disappear into thin air. Deep inside, behind that wall they've built, they're expecting something, they're testing, they're hoping, and if you don't understand the psychology behind it, you'll misread every signal, every pause, every quiet moment. Today, we're going to rip the mask off that mystery. I want you to see what's really going on inside an avoidance mind during no contact, so you can take back your power, stop guessing, and start leading your life from a place of certainty, strength, and freedom. Avoidants crave space, but secretly expect pursuit. This is one of the biggest paradoxes in human connection, and if you don't understand it, you'll keep playing their game without realizing it. On the surface, an avoidant will pull away, withdraw, and create emotional distance. They will appear strong, independent, and as if they don't need anyone. They pride themselves on being self-reliant and will often say things like, "I just need space," or "I can handle things on my own." But beneath that wall is a completely different story. The truth is, while they crave distance, they also want to feel that someone is willing to cross that distance for them. They expect that even when they retreat, you will keep chasing, checking in, and proving that you care enough to close the gap. This expectation isn't always conscious. Many avoidants don't sit there and plan it out logically, but the pattern runs deep in their psychology. From childhood or past experiences, they may have learned to associate closeness with fear or loss of control. So they push people away in order to protect themselves, but at the same time, their need for connection doesn't vanish. It hides underneath, waiting to be reassured without them having to risk vulnerability. That's where the contradiction lies. They want space, but at the same time, they want evidence that they are still wanted, still important, and still valued. When you go no contact, the avoidant is watching, maybe not directly, but emotionally. They are expecting signals. They wonder, will this person really let me go? Will they fight for me? Will they prove that I matter enough to break the silence? In their world, the pursuit is proof of significance. If you don't chase, it can trigger feelings of abandonment, even though they're the ones who created the distance in the first place. That's the secret loop they live in. They reject closeness, but they still want reassurance that closeness is available on their terms. This is why avoidants often seem contradictory in their actions. One moment, they can be warm, affectionate, and engaged, and the next moment, they create a wall of silence. They want to retreat into their comfort zone, yet secretly crave that you'll follow them into it. It's not about words or big gestures for them. It's about knowing that when they push away, someone still cares enough to lean forward. That hidden expectation fuels the push and pull dynamic in so many relationships with avoidants. Their craving for pursuit is less about love in the traditional sense and more about safety and control. By pulling away, they test if you'll tolerate their distance and still hold on. For them, pursuit equals security because it shows that they are significant enough for someone to stay even when the path is blocked. This is what makes no contact so powerful and so revealing when it comes to their hidden psychology. When someone with avoidant tendencies pulls back, they're not simply stepping away for peace or clarity. In reality, their silence is often a calculated test of your emotional resilience. They want to know whether you'll break under the pressure of not hearing from them. That space they create isn't just about distance. It's about observing your reactions from afar. They wonder, will you chase after me? Will you collapse emotionally without my presence? Will you hold steady in your own strength? These unspoken questions run through their mind, and while they may never say it aloud, they expect you to respond in certain ways. For avoidance, silence becomes a psychological tool. They have learned, through their patterns and fears of closeness, that stepping back shields them from vulnerability. But more than that, it offers them a chance to gauge how important they are in your life. If you immediately reach out, text, or try to repair the connection, they interpret it as proof that they still hold emotional control. On the surface, it looks like they're indifferent, but inside, they're watching closely to see if your resilience bends or breaks. That resilience, your ability to stay grounded and not chase, becomes the very measure they use to judge your strength. This testing isn't always conscious. Sometimes an avoidant person isn't deliberately planning a strategy, but their inner world is wired to look for reassurance through detachment. By withdrawing, they unconsciously create a challenge. They're searching for the answer to whether you can stand in your own certainty without needing constant validation from them. And paradoxically, while they fear intimacy, they also respect strength. When they see that you don't crumble in their absence, it disrupts their expectations. They're left unsettled because deep down they anticipated a more fragile response. This is why silence during no contact can feel so intense. It's not just a gap in communication, it's a psychological pressure cooker. Every moment of silence is laced with their hidden expectation that you'll eventually crack. They thrive on that tension because it reassures them of their significance while keeping them safely behind emotional walls. And for them, it's easier to test you this way than to openly express their own needs. Avoidants often carry a fear of being too vulnerable, of showing that they want closeness as much as they fear it. Instead of admitting those desires, they cloak them in silence, watching and waiting for your reaction. Your ability to remain steady during that silence, to not allow your emotions to spiral or force connection out of panic, is the exact resilience they don't expect. While they anticipate your weakness, what truly catches their attention is your strength. They may not admit it, but they secretly measure your worth through how you handle their withdrawal. And this is why emotional resilience is not just a personal strength. It becomes the very answer to the test they quietly place before you every time they go no contact. When an avoidant pulls away and creates distance, one of the most powerful psychological games that begins to play out is the expectation that you will start doubting yourself first. This isn't always a conscious strategy on their part. Rather, it's a deeply ingrained pattern that comes from how avoidants have learned to protect themselves emotionally. They have often built their inner walls around the belief that closeness leads to pain, rejection, or loss of freedom. When they step back and stop engaging, they aren't just creating space, they're also watching, even if subtly, to see how quickly you begin to unravel in that silence. The human mind doesn't sit well with uncertainty. When you don't get responses, when there's no communication, your brain immediately tries to fill the gaps. That's when self-doubt starts creeping in. Did I do something wrong? Did I push too hard? Did I not give enough? Are they losing interest? For someone with an anxious or even secure attachment style, this quiet is like fuel thrown into a fire. The avoidant, on the other hand, expects that silence to flip the script in their favor. By withdrawing, they shift the burden of emotional tension onto you, anticipating that you'll start chasing answers. At a deeper level, this expectation comes from the avoidant's relationship with control. Distance is their tool. When they take it, they assume the other person will begin to feel powerless, uncertain, and unsteady. That imbalance creates a dynamic where the avoidant no longer has to risk vulnerability. Instead, they can watch the other person stumble in confusion. They expect the doubts in your mind to grow so loud that you'll question your worth, your actions, and even your reality. And when you start to doubt yourself, you unconsciously hand the avoidant the upper hand without them ever having to ask for it directly. What makes this expectation so powerful is that it doesn't need words. An avoidant doesn't have to call you out, criticize you, or even explain their absence. Their silence becomes a canvas, and your insecurities begin painting the picture. They anticipate this because in their world, you, relationships have often been places where they had to guard themselves or stay one step ahead to avoid pain. By making you doubt yourself, they avoid having to confront their own vulnerability. This pattern is not just about manipulation, it's about protection. Avoidants secretly expect you to carry the weight of uncertainty because it keeps them safe from carrying it themselves. It keeps them from having to admit they might feel fear, longing, or the need for connection. Instead, their distance sets the stage for you to overthink, to second, guess, and to try to earn back what was never openly taken away. And that expectation that you will crumble into doubt first becomes the silent agreement they rely on every time they withdraw. Deep down, avoidants want validation without vulnerability. On the surface, they may appear detached, self-sufficient, and emotionally indifferent. They present an image of not needing anyone, as if they are in full control of their feelings and their world. But beneath that calm and distant exterior, there exists a deep human craving to feel wanted, valued, and significant. Avoidants are not immune to the fundamental human need for connection. The paradox is that they seek this validation while simultaneously fearing the intimacy and openness that usually comes with it. They want to be reassured of their worth, but they resist exposing themselves in ways that would allow someone to see that hidden longing. When no contact happens, this tension becomes even stronger. On one hand, they may appear relieved by the space. They might even convince themselves that distance confirms their independence, but internally, a subtle expectation builds. They want proof that they still matter to you, that you are still thinking about them, that their absence has created a presence in your life. It is almost as though they want you to chase them, not because they will accept the closeness, but because the chase itself becomes validation. It reassures them without requiring them to step into vulnerability. This creates a strange push-pull dynamic in their psychology. Avoidants secretly measure your reactions to the silence. If you reach out too soon, they may interpret it as confirmation that they have power over you, which feeds their need for control but diminishes their respect. If you hold your ground and do not reach out, they may begin to feel the pressure of their own expectations. They want validation, but they want it on their terms. They don't want to admit that the no-contact phase affects them, but when their expectations of reassurance are not met, they feel the sting of being overlooked. That sting is often hidden under layers of denial, but it is there nonetheless. This is why dealing with an avoidant can be so confusing. They want you to see their value, but they are unwilling to be vulnerable enough to directly ask for it. They resist the very intimacy that could provide lasting reassurance, so they rely on indirect forms of validation. Silence becomes a game of who will move first, but under that game lies the truth. They are silently watching, waiting, and hoping for evidence of their importance. It is a need they would rarely admit, because to admit it would expose their desire for connection, which clashes with their fear of losing independence. The heart of this hidden expectation is not arrogance but fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of being seen too deeply, the fear of being trapped or controlled. So, they guard themselves by pretending they don't need reassurance, while quietly craving it more than they would ever confess. In no contact, their unspoken hope is that you will break first, that you will validate their significance without requiring them to step into vulnerability. It is a delicate dance between their need to feel wanted and their refusal to fully open the door to that desire. When an avoidant goes silent during no contact, one of the deepest things driving their behavior is the hidden need for control. On the surface, it may look like they are simply detaching, uninterested, or unaffected by the absence of communication, but beneath that exterior, there's a subtle psychological game at play. They want to know that they are still in charge of how the connection moves, even if they are the ones pulling away. By creating silence, They create a space where they can observe your reaction without having to expose their own vulnerabilities. It's not just distance, it's a power move designed to make them feel secure in their position. This need for control is tied to the way avoidants protect themselves from intimacy. For them, closeness feels risky. If they lean in too much, they fear losing their independence or getting hurt. So instead, they withdraw and set up barriers, but those barriers are never completely about escape. They are about setting the stage where they dictate the rhythm of the relationship. During no contact, an avoidant is subconsciously saying, "I will decide when and how this connection continues." It's not that they don't care, it's that they care in a way that requires them to manage the balance of closeness on their own terms. Another layer to this hidden need is how it feeds their sense of safety. Avoidants often feel overwhelmed by emotional intensity. When communication stops, they get breathing room, but at the same time, they expect that silence to reinforce their sense of influence. If you chase, it validates that they still have the upper hand. If you don't, it unsettles them, but even then, they interpret that through the lens of control. They wonder if they miscalculated, if their withdrawal didn't create the reaction they wanted. In both cases, control is the anchor. They are constantly measuring whether they still hold it or risk losing it. This secret expectation is that you will continue orbiting around them even in the quiet. They want to know you are still thinking about them, still reacting to them, even if you never send a message. This is why silence for them isn't empty. It's a space filled with imagined outcomes, guesses about your state of mind, and the hope that your world hasn't fully detached from theirs. The control doesn't just come from what they do. It comes from how much of your mental and emotional energy they still occupy, even when they are not present. This dynamic is rarely obvious to them on a conscious level. Most avoidants won't admit to needing control. They frame it as needing independence, needing space, or needing time to think, but in reality, the silence is structured. It's a test to see if they can stay in command of the bond without actively nurturing it. They secretly expect that you'll be caught in the tension, waiting, guessing, wondering what to do next. And as long as you're caught there, they feel they've maintained the balance they need to feel safe.